The following story was submitted to us by a gentleman who wishes to remain anonymous. This is a romance scam story, but not typical of our normal stories that we share about army generals and fake oil rig workers. It's called The Widower Searching for Love. This whole thing started 2 years after my wife passed away. I was married for 32 years to my high school sweetheart. My wife and I built a life together, a home, and had a daughter who grew up to be a successful woman. Our daughter moved to Florida. She has her own career in life. I married at 20 years old, and at 52, I found myself to be a widower. My wife passed away 2 years nearly to the date of who I met and thought was my second chance at companionship and love. Looking back on everything, maybe it was too soon, and I was in a very vulnerable place. A friend of mine suggested trying online dating and seek out some friendship. I wasn't really interested in a traditional dating site. I didn't want to meet someone for random hookups. I was more in search of some companionship, to get to know someone, and keep in mind to be open to meeting maybe a special companion. Instead of joining a dating site, I joined an international pen pal friendship site instead. It was a site where you could message with people all over the globe. You filled out the form of what you like, and they matched you with people around the globe with similar interests. One of my big things is cooking. I love to try cooking international dishes, and my wife and I love to travel. When she was alive, we would take cruises, and we had traveled all over Europe and many parts of South America, places like Brazil, Argentina, and Panama. I was matched with a handful of women who also enjoyed cooking. This is when I matched with a woman who I came to know as Cherry. Her profile said she was from Bangkok, Thailand, and said she was 40 years old. A bit younger than me, but remember, I'm seeking to make friends first. Although her profile picture was very lovely. Her hobbies were travel, dancing, and international cooking. I sent her a message introducing myself. Her language flags were English and Thai on her profile. I don't speak Thai, but I assumed she spoke English as well. I told her my name, told her that she had a nice profile picture, and just introduced the basics about myself. She was online as her little green light lit up next to her profile photo. And within a few minutes, she replied to my message, stating she lived in Bangkok, worked in a club in downtown Bangkok, and she was divorced and had a 12-year-old son. She told me her name was Cherry. She said it was just her shortened name, which I accepted as like a nickname. She told me that she has a son who is 12 years old, but she is divorced, and said her son lives in the countryside with his grandparents, while she works in the city to make ends meet, as there's not a lot of jobs in the country. I told her a little about my life, being a widower, and how I joined the app to meet friends. She told me she was doing the same, and to better knowledge her grasp of the English language. She said she spoke it pretty well, but writing was a challenge and she wanted to practice her English. She told me she loved cooking Thai food and all international dishes. Cherry had asked if I'd ever been to Thailand, and I told her no. I did tell her about all the places I had traveled with my late wife. Southeast Asia, though, was never one of the places we went. We stuck mostly to European countries and South American countries, as I stated earlier. Cherry said she's been working in the city for many years. She said she was a tour guide in a local club in Bangkok, showing tourists the best drinks and food to try in the club that she worked in. I'm semi-retired, but I work part-time as a consultant. After I lost my wife, I took a temporary retirement of sorts, a leave from my job, and I stayed home doing online consulting when needed, but I was taking some time out of life. I was living off my savings, investments, and I did a home refi loan to float me until I could find my way again. I had expected to take a few months off work, but it turned into a couple years. Life can take you for a loop after losing a loved one. I had planned to get back into the swing of things, but at the time I enjoyed taking this time off and away from the hustle and bustle of the office life. I told Cherry that I worked from home as a consultant. Even though I was seeking friendship, I didn't want her to think that I was some sort of bum who didn't work. It was just easier to tell her that I worked from home, which to some degree I did. We exchanged emails to communicate, mostly due to the fact that this app only allowed you to send a certain amount of messages a day unless you joined the premium service, which was $49 a month. And quite frankly, I wasn't going to pay a premium in the event I didn't find anyone interesting to chat to. Besides, exchanging email was simple. Cherry emailed me a hello and sent me several pictures of herself. Her photos she sent via email matched the woman on her profile photo from the friendship site, and I sent her a couple pictures of myself that I didn't have on the site. For being 40, she looked very young, but many times people from Thailand, Japan, Korea, etc. look really young even though they're middle-aged. Good genetics, I think. If you were to look at a picture of her, you could mistake her for maybe early 30s. We started to communicate through email. She wanted to practice her writing English, and I helped correct her when she got something wrong or a phrase was typed incorrectly. Our emails consisted of talking about the weather, my job, her son, her family, and my life. She was a little vague when I asked her about her job. The way she worded things, it was like she was a tourist consultant or a hostess. She said she worked in a very prestigious club in a resort for tourists. In my mind, I assumed it was like she worked at an all-inclusive resort in the restaurant area. I never pushed for the name or details. We chatted maybe 3 or 4 times a week, exchanging email, and this went on for a little over a month before I asked Cherry if she would like me to call her one day. She said she was very shy and unsure at first, but then told me we could call through WhatsApp. I downloaded WhatsApp and we exchanged numbers. She actually called me first and we spoke. She was a little shy at first, but then we started to chat and it all flowed pretty well. I hit the video call button, but she didn't pick up. She told me she's still very shy and unsure if she should pick up. I told her, well, when she's comfortable, she should video call me. We voice chatted for roughly an hour the first time. Her English was really good, and she told me she'd been studying her English for years, and working where she works, a lot of Americans she'll chat to often, as it's a busy tourist area. And I don't know if it was my lack of attention of the female since losing my wife, or being lonely, or a combination of both, but I felt this deep connection with Cherry. A few days after our voice chat, she video called me. It was very early in the morning for me. She was the woman in the profile picture and photos she had sent me, so I knew I wasn't talking to a catfish at all. We video chatted for quite a while. It looked like she was in a small apartment. She told me she had a roommate, another female coworker she worked with, who she told me her name was Rose Apple. Her roommate Rose wasn't home during that time, but she showed me the apartment. It looked very small, but she said they shared expenses so they could send money home for her son and family and her roommate's family. She told me she hoped to only work in Bangkok for 1 more year, and then she had plans to build a home in the countryside next to her parents' farmland. She sounded like she had her head on straight and had goals, ambitions, and plans. I inquired more about her job, and she told me she was a hostess in a tourist club. As I stated earlier, I thought she worked in a resort, but as we spoke, the more the way she described things, it sounded like a bar. She told me it's a place for tourists from the US, UK, Australia, Germany, etc., frequent for drinks and food. I felt for her, as I'm sure it was a hectic job. She looked very tired during the video chat, but again, she also didn't look 40. I told her during this video, and she laughed and said she takes very good care of her skin. We continued this weekly video chat until it turned into an every other day video chat to everyday phone calls, and every night we'd video chat together. I was being careful with my heart, but it was filling with happiness, and something I felt good about, but was mixed with guilt. I haven't allowed myself to be happy since losing my wife, but Cherry filled my days with happiness, love, and she seemed to really care for me. In turn, I cared for her too. I started to care about her son and family. She would update me on things in her daily life and how her son was doing, her mother and father back home. It wasn't a fast romance like you hear about online. We actually kept things as friends for months and months. It took a good 6 months before I realized that I found myself falling for Cherry, and she felt the same. One night on video chat, I rolled the dice and expressed my feelings for her. She confessed that she felt the same. This took time for me and a ton of soul searching if it was okay for me to feel this way, if that makes sense to you. I spoke to my sister, who lived in Washington, told her what was going on, and she was less than thrilled. She told me to be careful, as there's tons of scammers out there. She wanted me to be happy and to move on with meeting someone special, which I told her Cherry was very special to me. I think at the time she was trying to look out for me, and I told her I'll be careful. Cherry and I kept up our online relationship. She confessed to me that she had hoped I would visit her, and I had toyed with the idea of visiting Thailand, but part of me was a bit fearful of doing so. By this time, we'd shared so much of ourselves. I knew her parents' names, her son, her whole life story, or so what I thought told to me by her. I had even met her roommate via video chat, and her roommate encouraged me to come and visit. It took some coaxing, but I found myself online late at night looking at travel packages to Thailand. If I was going to visit, I wanted to maybe make it a surprise, make the travel arrangements, and then surprise Cherry. Cherry, during our entire relationship, would almost always pick up when I called or video called. There was never any weird chats or weird video calls where she hid or didn't answer unless she was at work, which I typically didn't call when she was working. Cherry told me that she was going back home to the countryside to check on her son and parents. She told me her mom wasn't feeling well and she needed to make sure things were okay there. She told me that she'd be gone for about 2 weeks and then return back to Bangkok for work. She told me the internet is poor in the countryside, but she'd be in touch when she could. The night before she left for home, we video chatted, and I decided to share my idea of visiting. Cherry's reaction and face were mixed. I expected her to be thrilled and excited, but instead she paused for a few moments and then said, "Oh yes, please visit." Cherry left for the countryside, and I continued my consulting work and kept myself busy. I would explore more travel options and talk to my sister some about my plans. My sister was less than thrilled and suggested that I wait, and I think a big part of her reluctance to be supportive was because she loved my late wife so much she didn't want to see me with someone new. But she insisted it was because of safety concerns, saying I couldn't be sure who I was talking to. But I'd convinced myself my sister felt this way because she didn't want to see me move on. We actually ended up getting into an argument about Cherry, and my sister and I quit talking after a big argument on the phone about my love life with Cherry. She had accused Cherry of maybe being a working girl in the bars and told me to investigate what women do in tourist bars in Bangkok. I hung up on my sister and ended the conversation. Cherry wasn't like that. She was a hostess, a tour guide, not a working girl in a bar, and that's exactly what I told my sister. It was about a week and I had not heard from Cherry. I then received a phone call from her. The connection was very poor. Cherry was crying on the phone and I asked her what was wrong. She told me her mother had fallen ill and she needed to get some medication for her mother, and that they called a doctor to come out, and she spent all of her money paying for the doctor to come to her parents' house. She didn't even know how she'd get back to Bangkok, as her mother needed special medication for her stomach, and the family simply couldn't afford it. I had asked if she called her roommate and see if she could help, but she told me her roommate paid part of Cherry's rent because Cherry was now broke. Cherry asked me if I could send 10,000 baht, which at the time was around $300, and she convinced me that her mother would suffer without the medication and begged me for help. To me, $300 was not a ton of money. While it was a lot, it was a small amount to pay to help her mother, who she told me was already in her late 70s. A lot of my decision was based on my wife's passing. I went through so much medical obstacles with her, and a part of me thought I could help Cherry's mother, where there was nothing I could do to help my wife with her disease before she passed. I'm not using this as an excuse, but I want your viewers to know where my mental state was during this time. I told Cherry I could help and asked her how to get the money to her. She told me that being in the countryside, it would be easier to send the money to the doctor directly, as he could then send the medicine from his medical complex. I had no clue how things work in Thailand, and I told Cherry to just give me the information and I'll transfer the money. She gave me the name of a man who she said was the doctor and asked me to transfer the money. I went ahead and did this and transferred the money. With the transfer fee, it came to a little bit over $300. Cherry thanked me, but the connection was so poor that the call was cut short. The last thing she said to me was, "I love you, and I'll be home in 5 days." I waited and kept busy. I had actually narrowed down my time to visit Thailand to around the end of May, and it was now March, which left me plenty of time to arrange everything. I had planned to stay there for 2 weeks. Cherry called me on video when she arrived home. However, this call was met with her crying. She told me that her roommate had paid her part of the rent, but her roommate needed Cherry's rent. She had intended to pay it when she had returned home, but didn't expect to spend all her money on her mother's doctor visit. She told me she was going to have to go back to work the next night, but her roommate was making threats to throw her out and could get her fired from her job, as her roommate is friends with the owner of where they both work. Cherry told me her half of the rent was 15,000 baht. This included her electric and her cell phone bill, which her roommate paid for her while she was gone. Cherry was now sobbing on video, and it broke my heart. She asked if I would be able to help her, which I told her I could. I told her I could wire her the money right away, right now. She told me I would have to send it to her roommate, as that's who she owed the money to. Cherry gave me her roommate's real full name, and I wired the money. She thanked me and told me she felt so bad for asking me for money. This is when I took the opportunity to bring up her work. She mentioned she would go to work the next night, and I asked her for the details on what she actually did. She told me that she hosts guests, gets them drinks and food, and suggests to them what to order. I was a little concerned, as again she was vague, but she told me that it was an innocent hostess job. I brought up what I learned about what women who work in bars and clubs do in Bangkok, and she became angry with me, asking if I was accusing her of being a freelancer. This is the first time I'd heard that word. I didn't know what she meant, and I actually had to look it up. If you don't know, it's an easy search that can explain it to you. She told me she is a hostess, nothing more, and she was angry I accused her of doing such things. We hung up and didn't talk for 2 whole days. I kept sending her messages, and she ignored me. Finally, after the 3rd day, she called me. She actually apologized to me because she said she was under so much stress, being worried about her mother, father, and son. We chatted about her family, and she told me she can't wait to go home and build her home in the countryside, and asked about me visiting. This is when I decided to go ahead and tell her about my plans to come in May, even though I was going to keep it a secret. She asked me what dates, and I told her I wasn't sure yet, but I would let her know once it's booked. Things went on as normal, and we were back to our loving ways, talking nightly, talking in the mornings. Everything was smooth sailing. I booked my travel plans for the 2nd week of May. It was during Mother's Day weekend, which was a bit tough on me. I called my daughter to let her know I would be away during Mother's Day weekend. She was still struggling with the loss of her mother, but she had a career and a life, and I told her my plans, and she was extremely shocked. She wanted to see me happy, but just like my sister, who I'd still not spoken to since our argument, was concerned instead of excited. I just wanted someone to be happy for me, and my family wasn't even supportive. So I found this in Cherry. She was excited when I told her the news, and I had booked my flight, but not my hotel. I asked her where she works, the address, so I can book a hotel near her work to make it easy for us to meet up. Cherry was a little hesitant. She told me that I should book a hotel in a good area and she could meet me when I arrived. She actually started to sound a little down. I asked her if she wasn't excited. She said she was, but there was some problems at home with her family. She told me that the land she was having her home built on, the builder had issues, and that he was making threats to take the material back if she didn't make the next payment on the building project. She said she was making monthly payments to the builders and that she was catching up with saving money due to work and trying to save what she could. She asked me when I visit if I'd like to see the home in the countryside that she's having built and to meet her family. I told her we could explore that and that I was going to be there for 2 whole weeks. She didn't ask me directly about money for the builders. She just told me she wouldn't be able for us to chat much because she'll be working double shifts at the club to try and get money to keep the builders there. I asked her how much she needed for the builder to stay, and she told me it was 100,000 baht, which is roughly 3,000 US dollars. She told me there was 2 more payments after this one to pay all the building materials. Cherry changed the subject and started talking about all the things we would do during my visit. We talked about all the romantic things we would do, the sights, the food, the cooking, we would see, what we would do, and she wanted to introduce me to her family. I continued my days planning for this trip, and as the weeks got closer, Cherry would speak less and less. I started to really get concerned as we went from daily video chats and voice calls to every few days just texting a hello. I called Cherry to confront her on this, and she told me that her mother had fallen ill again, and the builder had still not been paid. She was not in touch because she was working so much, often 15 hours a day, to save money for the builder, and now her mother needed surgery on her stomach, and the family had no money to pay for it. In addition to the building not being paid, her mother's surgery was going to be 300,000 baht, plus she owed the builder 120,000 baht, so in total roughly 12 to 13,000 US dollars. Cherry told me to cancel my trip as she had to suddenly go to the countryside to be with her mother, and that she was considering doing freelancer work to try and make the money quickly, which made me angry. I didn't want to think of her being with other men, especially in that way. I told her no way would she be doing that, and she told me she had no choice. She then asked me if I could help her with the money. Now, a few $100 wouldn't hurt too much, but a little over 12,000 US dollars probably would. I had savings, as I said at the beginning of the story, but this would impact things big time. I just spent some savings on the flights, hotel, and travel expenses. I told Cherry when I arrive we can talk about things, but she told me there's no time and that her mother needs this surgery right away for her stomach as they suspect she has cancer. This struck me hard to my core, and I told her I'll help. I told her when I arrive I will pay for things, but she told me there is absolutely no time and she will begin freelance work tonight to earn money. I forbid this and told her it will cause me to end the relationship. That's when she begged me for the money. I finally broke down and told her I'll send it. I asked her to give me her bank information and I would do a transfer, but she told me that I would have to send the money to the builder for his portion and then the doctor for her mother's surgery payment. I took down the information again and I made arrangements to send the money. Cherry thanked me so many times, nearly crying on video when the money had gone through. She confirmed the builder got paid and even sent me photos from the builder showing the supplies being dropped off, which I've included in this email. She then said her mother was scheduled for surgery, which happened to be on the day I was set to arrive in Bangkok. Cherry told me not to come and to reschedule my arrival as she would be with her mother. I told her no and that I would come with her and be there while her mother has surgery. Cherry insisted I shouldn't ruin my vacation sitting in a hospital. She told me she was unsure how she would get to the hospital, which was in a larger town but still far away from where she was in Bangkok. I asked her if her roommate can drive her, but she said her roommate didn't drive, but she asked her boss at work, and he told her that he could arrange for transportation, but that she would have to start freelancing in the club. I asked Cherry how much it would be to arrange a driver to take her, and she told me it was only 500 baht. I told Cherry that I would send her the money for her to get transportation to the hospital. I didn't want her working as a freelancer in any club. Cherry accepted my offer, which, yes, I insisted, and told her I would wire her the money. But she told me instead she would arrange a driver and gave me the name of a man in Bangkok who would be a hired driver. I sent the money to the driver, which wasn't much money at all, around 20 US dollars. When I inquired about the hospital name where her mother would be, she didn't say. All she said was it's in a bigger city. I then asked her where her roommate has been, as I used to see her walking around when we would video chat, or she would say hello, but I had not heard or seen her. She told me her roommate started working as a freelancer in another club, and they don't work together anymore, but they still share the living space, but work different hours. When I asked her which club and questioned things, she would be vague or change the subject and tell me how much she loves me. I started to feel off with this relationship. You know that little voice that tells you something's wrong? Cherry would often not answer my calls where she normally would, stating she was working. I suspected maybe she was lying to me and working in the adult industry of these clubs. Cherry asked me if I arranged my visit and had I rearranged it. I lied. I told her I did, and I would visit in June instead of May. A big part of me felt guilty for lying, but another part of me felt like I needed to play private investigator. It was a week before her mother's so-called surgery, and her and I spoke less. She assumed I had changed my flight plans, and during our entire relationship, she told me she didn't have social media, no IG, no FB, and I took her word for it. I had FB, but I wasn't a frequent user. I used it to keep up with family and things like that, but I wasn't a social media expert. Part of the reason was because my FB had pictures of my wife and I and our family pictures, and it really hurt me at the time to look at it. But for the first time in ages, I went on FB, catching up on messages and looking at old Mother's Day pictures in my albums. My daughter had posted an early Happy Heavenly Mother's Day to her mom. It was a photo of when she was 8 years old, and my wife and we were all eating dinner together at my wife's favorite restaurant. I totally broke down, feeling so depressed. I responded on the post from my now adult daughter, and then clicked off the picture and back onto my news feed. Now, call this divine intervention, but on FB, where it has the people you might know feature, well, lo and behold, thanks to the algorithms of social media, I had a friend suggestion of a woman whose name was Cherry Cherry in the middle with a full first name and last name. So the Cherry Cherry part was a nickname in the profile, if it makes sense to your viewers. I clicked on the profile and clicked on the picture. It looked like Cherry. I was met with a wide open profile of Cherry with her roommate and other girls and loads of pictures and posts. I clicked on the About section and it said her birth date was 1999. Totally different month and day than what she told me, and it said she was in a relationship with a man named Mark. When I clicked on Mark's name, his profile was of a man from the UK who looked to be about 60 years old. As I clicked through Mark's profile, it had albums of trips to Thailand, pictures of him and Cherry, pictures of him at bars at Bangkok with other girls, club parties, and photos of him and her, and a few pictures of him and the so-called roommate of Cherry's. I was sitting there feeling like an idiot. Maybe this was an ex? Maybe she had not updated her profile in years? I was in denial. I made the active choice to message this Mark. I decided not to confront Cherry, but to see what he said. It was about a day later I received a message back from Mark asking who I was, and he asked if I wanted to call him. I had basically sent him a message saying that I was in a long-term relationship with Cherry, and I was very confused, and he asked if he could message me or call me. I ended up video chatting on Messenger with this Mark guy. He picked up, and he was a British man from the UK, but was living in Bangkok half the time and split his time between the UK and Thailand. Mark answered the video call. He was sitting on a patio in what looked like to be Bangkok or some Thai city. Mark asked me how I knew Cherry, and I spilled out the entire relationship to him. I told him I was due to come out to Thailand, and I was confused and upset, and I started rambling about the money I've sent. He stopped me and told me to listen. He had dated Cherry when he met her in a club in Bangkok. She was a bar girl. He had bought her drinks and spent a week at his hotel and started a kind of relationship with her. He said they were casual friends and he would come to Bangkok and she would meet him for a good time. He said she was a freelancer and had been for a couple of years. He told me she's not 40, she's in her 20s. She didn't have a son. Her parents did live in the countryside, but they're not elderly. Her mother owns a store, and her dad's a farmer, and they both have successful businesses. In fact, both her parents are very healthy and fine. I told him the story of her sick mother, and his next response to me was, "How much money have you sent her, mate?" Mark explained to me that he and Cherry would hook up for fun, and that they were in a relationship but not committed, other than good time partners when he was in town. He had been giving her money for quite a long time, but he had cut off the funds after she started dating other men, and she has a Thai boyfriend who lives in the country. We compared names, and it was the so-called doctor that I had sent money to. He said this is very common, and for the time he thought they would just be exclusive, but he learned you never fall for a freelancer. They are still casual friends, but Cherry has not likely changed her profile about section in ages. He advised me to stop communication with her and cut my losses, as he kind of did the same after she kept asking him for loans or to help. But he assured me that she does not have a son and she is in her 20s. In fact, during the video chat we had, he showed me more photos of Cherry that I'd not seen before. She had nice clothing, purses, and was doing quite well in her line of work. I told Mark I didn't know what to do because I was flying out, and he encouraged me to take my vacation anyway, but don't tell Cherry you're coming. He even offered to meet me while I was in Bangkok and could prove to me who Cherry really was. At this point I was heartbroken and distraught. Mark, though, seemed very genuine in warning me, and my sister was right all this time, as was my daughter, and I didn't listen to them through grief. I'd made some bad judgments. Cherry was distant again, and so was I. I decided I had absolutely nothing to lose, and I took my trip. Mark's words to me stayed with me the entire flight. To come anyways and enjoy. There are better things to see than Cherry in Bangkok, and I'd already paid for the trip. So I did just that. With a confused heart and mind, I went to Bangkok. I did meet up with Mark, and he shared with me photos of Cherry, who by this time was supposed to be with her mother for her surgery. Mark took me to a club where Cherry worked, and with my own eyes I saw her. She was working the room, hugged up to different tourists, having what they call lady drinks with unsuspecting older men. I felt sick. I wanted to confront her, but instead I just blocked her on my phone after sending her a picture of herself in the club. I also told her in a message that I was going to the Thai police. Mark advised me that this type of scam is very common in Thailand, and he advised me to move on and cut my losses. I was scammed by a freelancer. Simple as that. I met with Mark once more before leaving Thailand after my 2-week vacation. I don't know if it was fate that brought her profile up on Friends. I might not know, and if I had not found out, I may have come across her profile or never came across it, and I would have never met Mark. And who knows how much money I would have lost. To be honest, I enjoyed my vacation as there was not much else I could do. I flew home, ended up calling my sister and telling her what happened. The whole "I told you so" conversation went on for ages. I also let my daughter know too. I didn't disclose how much money I lost to either one of them, but I know they both know that I lost money. I had spent the better part of that summer in grief therapy, and I'm now more balanced and mentally stronger. I went back to work full time to play catch up on my losses and to keep my mind and body busy with work. I have since recovered the money I lost. Cherry never reached out to me again after blocking her and having sent that photo and message. I'm sure it shook her, but then again, she's a professional scammer and it might not have even fazed her. I no longer date online or seek friendship online. I have, if I decide to date again, we'll do it in person. Thank you for letting me share my long encounter story. Well, I know this wasn't a typical romance scam story with a fake profile. It was a romance scam, all the same. We'd like to thank this gentleman for sharing his story. It is not a typical romance scam story that we hear, but he was scammed just the same from someone he met online. It comes down to not sending money to someone you don't know, no matter what sad story they tell you. And if anything, if it feels wrong, if there's red flags, block that person. You have nothing to lose.